All right, buckle up, because today we're going deep on the Book of Ezekiel.
Yeah, Ezekiel.
This guy was a prophet who definitely wasn't afraid to get a little strange with his visions and prophecies.
And
Oh
consequences?
yeah, some serious consequences for those who, well, strayed from the path.
Right, right.
But you know what, considering how much you love digging into the historical context and how these old texts still have so much to say to us today,
Hmm.
I have a feeling this is going to be right up your alley.
Oh, for sure.
So, to guide us, we've got excerpts straight from the Book of Ezekiel.
That's great from the source.
And of course, we've got some super insightful scholarly notes to help us unpack it all.
Gotta have those notes.
But first,
Yeah.
let's set the scene, right?
Absolutely.
We're talking about a time when Israel was in a pretty, well, precarious position politically.
Divided kingdom.
Exactly, and facing all these threats from empires like Assyria and Babylon.
All those big empires, yeah.
So those prophecies against other nations, they take on a whole new meaning when you see them in that light. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. The context is key.
But we can't get ahead of ourselves, right? We've got to start with Ezekiel's own, what would you call it? His call to adventure?
His origin story, his big moment, yeah.
He's just hanging out by the Kibar River, minding his own business.
Just another day.
And bam,
Here it comes.
things get totally biblical epic.
Oh, yeah.
So picture this, right? A whirlwind just rips open the sky.
Oh.
Out of this total chaos, you see 4 creatures.
Hmm.
But we're not talking about your average animals here.
Yep.
These are creatures unlike anything you've ever imagined, covered in eyes, with wheels within wheels.
There's a lot to take in.
Right. The sheer strangeness of it all, it was meant to grab your attention.
Definitely not your typical Tuesday afternoon.
Absolutely not.
And you know what's interesting? The scholarly notes actually point out that there's some debate about when exactly this vision happened.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the 30th year that's mentioned, it could be talking about Ezekiel's age or even some major event from the past. I see adds another layer of mystery, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah, to this already mind-bending experience.
That's a lot to unpack.
Okay, I'm trying to wrap my head around this. All those eyes, those wheels within wheels, it's like
Yeah.
some kind of divine cosmic machine, and Ezekiel's right smack in the middle of it.
He's right there in the action.
And it's definitely not subtle.
Not subtle at all.
No, this vision, it's God's way of saying, like, hey, Ezekiel, I need you. This is his commissioning as a prophet.
His big calling.
Right, his call to deliver God's message to the Israelites.
The chosen people.
Who, let's be real, weren't exactly known for following the rules.
A little rebellious.
Rebellious might be putting it mildly.
Okay, yeah, maybe a little more than a little.
Ezekiel's going to have to deliver some tough news.
Definitely not going to be easy.
And that's where the idea of the prophet as a watchman comes in.
The watchman on the wall.
Exactly. It's more than just delivering a message.
It's a responsibility.
Right. It's a responsibility to warn people of the danger they're in.
Oh, I see.
Like he's a lookout on the city walls, sounding the alarm.
Big responsibilities.
Big time. And imagine the burden of that responsibility.
Well, yeah,
If the watchman doesn't warn the people and something bad happens, it's on him.
that's heavy.
It makes you think about times when you felt a similar pressure to speak up, right? Even when it's uncomfortable.
Oh, absolutely. We've all been there.
Yeah, but it's one thing to speak up. It's
Yeah.
another to get people to actually listen.
Especially when they don't want to hear it.
Especially when they don't want to hear what you have to say. And that's where Ezekiel's symbolic actions come in.
Okay, symbolic actions.
We're going to get into that, but first, a quick break.
Sounds good. So these symbolic actions.
Yeah, like what are we talking about here?
Well, you got to remember, these weren't just some, like, random things he was doing.
Yeah.
No, each action was, like, carefully designed
Mm-hmm.
to visually convey God's message
Mm-hmm.
to an audience that, let's be honest, was pretty resistant to change.
Okay, yeah, they weren't exactly known for being open-minded.
Right. So imagine Ezekiel, like, drawing a siege of Jerusalem on a
Mhm.
brick.
Hold on, I'm picturing him with like a brick, like a kid playing in a sandbox.
Yeah.
But he's delivering this deadly serious message about the city's destruction.
Exactly. It's a way to make it real,
Uh-huh.
to make people actually see what's coming.
I see, yeah.
Or how about when he lays on his side
Mm-hmm.
for 390 days?
390 days.
Yeah, representing the years of Israel's and Judah's sin.
Wow, that's dedication to a message.
That's commitment right there.
Oh, yeah.
And then there's the whole haircutting thing,
Oh, right.
dividing his hair into portions,
Mm-hmm.
representing different fates for the people.
It's like he's saying, look, this isn't just words, this is real, this is going to happen.
Exactly. It's about shaking people up.
Right, making them pay attention.
Because if you just keep saying the same things over and over.
They tune you out.
Exactly.
Okay, so he's got their attention.
Yeah.
What's the message? What are the big takeaways from these prophecies?
Judgment. That's first and foremost.
Okay.
Ezekiel's crystal clear about the consequences of what he calls idolatry, injustice.
And what does he mean by that exactly?
Well, by idolatry, he's not just talking about worshiping statues. He's talking about anything that people put before God. Wealth, power, their own desires.
Anything that takes precedence, yeah.
Right, and by injustice, he's calling out the corruption, the exploitation that was rampant in society.
So it's a spiritual message, but it's also a social and political one.
It's all connected.
Wow.
So he's basically saying, you've turned away from God, you're treating each other terribly, and there are going to be consequences.
Not exactly light reading?
No, not at all, but it's not all doom and gloom.
Oh, good.
Amidst all these warnings, God also promises restoration after exile.
Okay, restoration.
Imagine a nation shattered, scattered like a broken vase. Ezekiel is saying those pieces can be put back together, made whole again.
So there's hope, even in the darkest times.
Absolutely. Chance for renewal.
That must have resonated with the Israelites living in exile.
Oh, I'm sure it did. It's like saying, hey, this isn't the end. There's still hope.
Right, right.
But that hope,
yeah,
it's tied to a return to God,
yeah,
a turning away from the things that led to their downfall.
And that brings us to another, I guess, fascinating aspect of Ezekiel's prophecies.
Oh, yeah.
His focus on individual responsibility.
Ah, yes. That's a key theme.
He really challenges that whole children inherit their parents' guilt idea.
You're a radical concept for the time.
Big time. He's saying, look, each person is responsible for their own actions. God judges each of us based on what we do, not on our family history.
It's about personal accountability.
Right. And he even addresses the Israelites' complaints about God's justice.
Oh, they had some complaints.
Oh, yeah. They're basically arguing this isn't fair. But God's response, basically, take a look at your own actions.
It's easy to point fingers.
It is, but Ezekiel's saying we can't always blame others for our circumstances.
It's about taking ownership.
Right. And that leads to another question.
Yeah.
What about those who might argue that punishing children for their parents' sins is unfair?
Yeah.
That they're being held accountable for something they didn't do?
Well, that's where it gets a little nuanced.
Okay.
Ezekiel emphasizes repentance and personal transformation. He's saying, even if you've been dealt a bad hand, even if you've been influenced by the choices of others,
right,
you still have the power to choose a different path.
To turn away from the bad stuff.
Exactly, to turn away from evil and towards God.
It's a message that goes beyond the specific context of ancient Israel.
It's universal.
Absolutely.
So it's about individual accountability, but also about the possibility of redemption. It's not a fixed fate. It's about making choices.
And those choices have consequences.
For sure.
Both for ourselves and for the community.
Right. And speaking of consequences...
Uh-oh. What now?
We can't overlook Ezekiel's lament for the princes of Israel.
Oh, right. The princes.
This lament, it's not just some, like, dry historical account.
Oh.
No. Ezekiel paints this vivid picture, comparing them to lions captured and silenced.
Oh, wow.
It's almost Shakespearean. You know?
Yeah.
That sense of tragedy and loss.
Really powerful imagery.
It speaks to the depth of the crisis.
Yeah.
Facing Israel, their leaders, once powerful and roaring, now reduced to silence and captivity.
A real fall from grace.
But Ezekiel's vision, it extends beyond Israel's borders.
Oh, how so?
He sees this wider pattern of arrogance and exploitation playing out.
Like on the world stage.
Exactly. Which brings us to the prophecies against the nations.
Okay, the prophecies against the nations.
So it's not just the Israelites who are in trouble here. God's judgment is far-reaching.
I see.
We see prophecies against Ammon, Tyre.
And
these aren't just vague warnings, are they?
Oh, no, Ezekiel gets pretty specific. Like what? Give me an example.
Take Tyre, for instance.
Okay, Tyre.
A major trading power at the time.
Right, I remember that.
Ezekiel describes its destruction in almost cinematic detail.
Whoa.
Ships sinking, merchants lamenting, the once proud city reduced to a bare rock.
It's a pretty bleak picture.
It's meant to convey the utter devastation, the finality of God's judgment.
And it's not just about punishment, though, is it?
No.
There's a deeper message here.
It's about the consequences of pride and greed.
Ah, I see.
Remember, Tyre had profited from Jerusalem's fall.
Right.
And Ezekiel is highlighting the interconnectedness of nations, and the ripple effects of injustice.
It's like he's saying, you might think you're immune, that you can just sit back and watch while others suffer, but you're not off the hook.
Exactly. We're all part of a larger system.
We are.
And our actions or inaction have consequences.
Makes you think.
It does. And amidst all this talk of judgment and destruction, we come to one of the most powerful and hopeful images in Ezekiel.
Okay, tell me more.
The vision of the dry bones.
Oh, the dry bones, yeah.
Imagine a valley filled with dry bones.
Okay.
Bleached white by the sun.
Mm-hmm.
Symbols of death and despair.
Yeah, I'm picturing it.
Then, Ezekiel is commanded to prophesy to these bones.
Into the bones?
Yeah, to speak life into them.
Okay, this is where it gets a little creepy for me.
It's like something out of a zombie movie, right?
Exactly. But these bones are coming back to life not as monsters, but as a symbol of national resurrection.
It's a metaphor for the restoration of Israel.
Right, the nation that has been scattered and broken.
But Ezekiel's proclaiming that even in the face of what seems like irreversible loss,
Yeah.
there's still hope for renewal.
There's always hope.
Those dry bones, they represent the potential for new life, for a nation to be reborn.
Powerful stuff.
And to really drive that point home, there's the symbolic action of the two sticks.
Oh yeah, the two sticks.
It's like a visual aid for a pretty complex political situation. You've got these two sticks representing the divided kingdoms of Judah and Israel.
Uh-huh.
And Ezekiel is commanded to join them together.
So simple, yet so profound.
It's a powerful visual representation of reunification.
Unity.
Remember, at this time, Israel was divided, weakened by internal conflict.
Right.
But this action points to a future where those divisions are healed, where Judah and Israel are united under one king, one God.
A message of hope and unity.
A reminder that despite their differences, they are ultimately one people.
It's like a political cartoon come to life.
And it sets the stage for the grand finale of Ezekiel's visions, the new temple.
The new temple, yeah.
This is where Ezekiel really gets into the detail.
He does, doesn't he?
It's almost like he's drawing up blueprints for the future.
I love that. Blueprints for the future.
He's meticulous in his descriptions of the temple's layout, its dimensions, its furnishings.
Wow, so much detail.
It's a vision that combines both practicality and profound symbolism.
Okay.
This new temple represents more than just a building.
I see.
It's a symbol of the restoration of God's presence among his people.
It's like the ultimate homecoming.
And then we have that awe-inspiring moment when God's glory returns to the temple.
Chill.
It's the culmination of everything Ezekiel has been prophesying.
Wow.
Imagine this radiant, overwhelming presence filling the temple.
I'm trying to...
signifying the renewal of God's covenant with his people.
It's like saying, despite all the judgment and exile, God hasn't abandoned you. He's returning to dwell among you.
It's a powerful message of hope and reconciliation.
But it's not just a passive dwelling, is it?
No.
This presence comes with expectations, with guidelines for how to live in right relationship with God.
Exactly, and that's where we see the detailed instructions for the priests.
The priests, right?
The guardians of the temple.
I had a big job.
These aren't just arbitrary rules. No. They're designed to maintain the sanctity of the sacred space. And to reflect the holiness of God's presence.
No wild parties for these guys.
It highlights the seriousness with which they were to approach their role.
Right. They were intermediaries between God and the people.
Exactly. So their lives had to reflect the holiness and purity associated with the divine presence.
I see. So we've got the temple, the priests, the guidelines for worship.
It's all coming together.
This vision of a restored Israel, but what about the land itself?
Good question.
What happens to the land that was once desolate, a symbol of their brokenness and exile?
That's where Ezekiel's vision of the river comes in.
Okay, the river.
He sees a river flowing from the temple, bringing life and fertility to the barren land.
A symbol of transformation.
A reminder that God's presence can renew even the most desolate places.
Powerful imagery.
And this isn't just a trickle of water.
No.
This river gets wider and deeper the further it flows, eventually becoming a mighty torrent, overflowing with life and abundance.
Okay, I'm picturing this parched, cracked earth.
Yeah.
And then this life-giving water just bursting forth, transforming the landscape.
It's a visual representation of hope, of new beginnings.
Absolutely. And what about the trees? I remember something about trees.
Oh, yeah. On either side of the river, Ezekiel sees trees growing,
Uh-huh.
their fruit providing food, and their leaves offering healing.
It's beautiful.
A beautiful image of wholeness and restoration.
I see it.
A sign that even in a world marred by sin and brokenness,
Yeah.
God's grace can bring forth life and healing.
It's interesting how water is such a powerful symbol throughout the Bible.
It is.
And here, it's not just about physical sustenance.
No.
It's about spiritual renewal.
Right.
About the life-giving power of God's presence.
And this vision of the river, it extends beyond the immediate context of Israel's restoration.
Really.
It points to a universal longing for healing and wholeness, for a world transformed by God's grace.
So we've covered a lot of ground here, from prophecies of judgment and visions of despair to powerful images of hope and restoration.
It's quite a journey.
Ezekiel's journey takes us through the depths of human brokenness and the heights of divine grace.
And what's remarkable is how his message, written centuries ago, still resonates with us today.
Absolutely.
His warnings about the consequences of injustice, his emphasis on individual responsibility, his vision of a restored community.
It's all still so relevant.
These themes are as relevant now as they were then.
And it's not just the message itself, it's the way he delivers it. Those vivid images, those symbolic actions.
So powerful.
Those poetic laments.
They stick with you.
They really do.
It's a reminder that storytelling, imagery, those have always been powerful tools for communicating profound truths.
Right. And in a world that's constantly bombarded with information, maybe we need to rediscover the power of those ancient forms of communication.
I think you're right.
Sometimes a well-told story or a striking image can cut through the noise and touch us on a deeper level than 1,000 words ever could. Yeah, it really makes you appreciate the power of a good metaphor.
For sure.
Like, I can read about a river flowing from the temple, and, okay, it sounds nice, but when you connect it to that idea of spiritual renewal, of God's presence bringing life to this barren land,
it takes on a whole new meaning.
Totally. It's like it goes from, I don't know, just words on a page to something that you can actually feel.
Right. It's about engaging not just your mind, but your heart and your imagination.
And Ezekiel was a master of that.
Oh, yeah. But even in this vision of restoration, there's a twist.
A twist? What do you mean?
Remember that sealed gate in the temple?
The sealed gate. Oh, right.
It's like a do not enter sign straight from the divine.
Okay, so we've got this picture of God returning to dwell among his people, this beautiful image of closeness and intimacy. But then, bam, closed gate.
Well, that's the message.
That's the message there.
I think it's a reminder that even in this restored relationship, there's a boundary between the human and the divine.
Okay.
A reminder of God's ultimate transcendence and holiness.
So it's like saying, I'm here with you, but I'm also beyond your full comprehension.
Exactly.
It's almost like a, I don't know, healthy relationship reminder, right? Like, even in the closest relationships, there needs to be a sense of respect for each other's individuality and boundaries.
That's a great analogy. And this idea of boundaries and respect, it's further emphasized in the instructions for the priests.
Right. The guardians of the temple.
No wild parties for these guys.
Their lives were pretty regulated, weren't they?
Oh, yeah. They were held to an incredibly high standard, both in their ceremonial duties and their personal lives.
It makes you appreciate a good casual Friday.
It does, but it highlights the seriousness with which they were to approach their role.
Right. They were intermediaries between God and the people.
Exactly. So their lives had to reflect the holiness and purity associated with the divine presence.
So we've got the temple, the priests, the guidelines for worship. It's all part of this larger picture of a restored Israel.
Right.
A society rebuilt on a foundation of justice and right relationship with God.
It's a beautiful vision.
It is, but if we zoom out even further,
Yeah.
what does all this mean for us today?
That's the big question, isn't it?
We're living in a completely different time and context.
For sure.
So what can we take away from Ezekiel's wild ride?
Well, I think there's several layers to that.
Okay.
On one level, there's that timeless message of repentance and renewal. It's a reminder that no matter how far we've strayed, no matter how broken things seem, there's always the possibility of turning back.
Of starting fresh?
Exactly. It's like hitting the reset button.
Right.
But it's not just about erasing the past.
No.
It's about learning from it and making different choices.
And then there's the emphasis on individual responsibility.
Oh, that's huge.
Which I think is more relevant than ever.
Absolutely.
We live in a culture that often encourages us to blame others for our problems.
Yeah, to look for external solutions.
But Ezekiel's reminding us that ultimately we're each accountable for our own actions.
Right, and that change starts from within.
It's an inside job.
It is. And it's not just about individual change either.
No.
Remember that vision of the river flowing from the temple, bringing life to the land?
Oh, right, the river.
It speaks to the interconnectedness of things, how our actions ripple outward, affecting the community and the world around us.
We're all connected.
We are. It's a call to consider the impact of our choices, not just on ourselves,
but on those around us.
Exactly. And ultimately, Ezekiel's message is one of hope.
Hope, yeah.
Even in the face of judgment and exile, he points towards a future of restoration, of wholeness.
Of a world transformed by God's presence.
A world made new.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive into Ezekiel, I hope you're walking away with a few things.
Yeah.
A deeper understanding of the prophet's role.
Not just doom and gloom.
Not just doom and gloom, right? But as a watchman, a voice calling for repentance and renewal.
A voice of hope.
A renewed sense of your own agency and responsibility in shaping the world around you.
We all have a part to play.
And most importantly, a sense of hope.
Absolutely.
A reminder that even in the midst of brokenness and despair, there's always the possibility of transformation and a new life.
It's a journey worth taking, both through the pages of Ezekiel and in our own lives.
Couldn't have said it better myself.